very first episode of the Nic and the Nathan Show. That's right, this is a new show. If you clicked on this, you probably read the title/headline. I'm Nick. Joining with me on the call are actually two people named Nathan, which definitely won't get confusing here. So I think that's the first order of business. How should we sort this out?
Vote we call the other Nathan Nate.
All right, yeah.
Okay.
I'll be Nate. That'll work.
And I'm just regular old
choice
Nathan.
here. Okay, so we got Nathan, Nate, and Nick on the call. Super excited to have you guys joining me here today. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite movies of all time, one of my top 5 favorite movies, one that poor Mr. Mike from the Movie Reviews podcast over on Tailosive doesn't really like, unfortunately. So I needed to find some people who speak of my language and understand why Chris Nolan is the best movie maker of all time, specifically of my time, but probably also of all time. What movie are we talking about here today, Mr. Nate?
We are talking about Inception, the 2010 release by Christopher Nolan, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah, it's quite a film. It's not your average blockbuster that you just walk in on and understand in one viewing. It's a lot to it.
100% agreed with that. How many viewings did you think it took you to kind of like understand the general plot line of the movie?
Well, in
for
general,
me,
I got it on
you
my
go.
second viewing.
Okay.
But the first viewing was a little rocky. That's for sure.
How about you, Nathan?
Now I've got an interesting history with this beautiful film. So the first time I watched it, I was watching it with a couple friends, and the friend that introduced us all to it, he'd already seen it, and I feel like that's not a problem, because then you have someone to kind of like confirm like what's happening here.
Yeah.
So the first time I watched it, I had a tiny bit of help, but then the next day I had to watch it again. Like I basically walked home from that first viewing. I was just like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like, but they're in the next level, and then there's all the different levels going, and then it was just like, it's like how when you're on your other podcast, Nick, you're talking about how when you start thinking about something, you can't stop thinking about it. That was me with my first viewing of Inception. So I watched it again the next day, watched it again probably a week later, and I think when I watched it last Saturday, I think that was my probably my 9th or 10th viewing of it. So I'm getting in the double digits at this point, just because there's always something more to unpack. Like I've had viewings with subtitles, viewings without, like, so I've picked up on a lot of the subtleties and intricacies of it, and I'm so happy that I've wasted my time doing something worthwhile. If that makes sense. But
Yeah. How about you, Nate? How many times do you think you've watched this?
Oh, I've only seen it twice. I watched it first like a year ago, and then just a couple days ago. But
Nice.
after watching it the second time, I went back and because I rented it on YouTube for just like 48 hours, so I went back and watched a few scenes over, just that I didn't quite understand. So
Yeah.
I think I understand it now.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, that's exciting to hear. Definitely, this movie took me a long time to figure out. I first also, just like Nathan, I watched it with friends the first time, and they were all trying to, describe it to me while I was watching the movie, and I was just like, I am still so confused. What is going on here? This van is just falling for most of the movie. That's the whole movie takes place in like 8 seconds, which I guess on the highest level of in the plane, it takes place in milliseconds, right? But I was so confused.
why don't you send us down for another 5 minutes?
Yeah, right. It's like, well, things went wrong.
5
unfortunately.
minutes. We were down there for at least an hour.
Time works differently in the dream world. Yeah, so it's a very confusing movie, and actually, this is the first Christopher Nolan movie that I actually remember watching. So this one is probably my favorite just for that, because it was kind of the first one that blew my mind. Like, wait a minute. A movie isn't just about the good guys and the bad guys fighting each other in some epic battle. Like, what?
Like in Inception, like there's definitely characters that are like antagonistic characters, but
yeah,
they're not really like, they don't really have any motivation. because their motivation just like kill the good guys. That's their only motivation, right? Because they're just projections.
Yeah.
Like what I love about Inception is like at times Saito has some antagonistic like qualities to him, but then he eventually becomes a member of the team. And Cillian Murphy's character, Fisher, Robert Fisher, I think.
Yep.
He's like, we get to see so much change in him, and sure they're trying to perform Inception on him, but like he's like he has one of the better arcs in this film. And it all helps that Cillian Murphy's just an amazing actor. If you look at any of his other work, like he's just phenomenal.
I really love the bookend that they put on Fisher's character at the very beginning of the heist. He's kind of aloof and not really thinking about anything on the airplane. As he gets his passport and the drink and stuff, and he's just kind of like, this is such an inconvenience. I'm not on my private jet. But then after, when he wakes up, he's just like deep in thought. And you're just like, ooh, it worked. Ooh, he's thinking.
and like when they're all leaving at the airport, he's like taking a second look at all the people in there. He was like just,
who are you? I think I know you.
Oh wow, I didn't even pick up on that. Wow. That's what
there's
many
definitely
viewings will do.
I know. Unfortunately, I've donated way too much time, and I always say I don't really like watching movies, which in general I don't, because I feel like I'm not using my time wisely. But when we get to talk about it on a podcast, I can justify it as work. So here I have been planning for the past 5 or 6 years, getting ready for this podcast here by watching this just multiple times over and over again. So we kind of wanted to go in the order of kind of quick summary, and then kind of go by topic, I guess, and section of what we have to talk about here. So why don't we start with a quick summary? Anyone want to offer up a quick summary?
I think we can let the guy who's seen it 10 times. He probably knows it best.
all right then.
Okay.
Well, explaining it out loud, like it's kind of like one of those movies where like, oh, this sounds kind of shallow when you start out, but like you have to see it to believe it. But we start out on this beach, this beautiful slow-mo shot of these waves, and like this all comes into play later. This first scene of the movie, it's one of the last scenes of the movie, and I love it when they do that. There's a couple other Nolan movies that do this, I think, but we see Cobb just getting up on the beach, and there are a couple guards like speaking Japanese that come and like search him and stuff, and they drag him up to this like Oriental Japanese themed like palace place, and we see an old Japanese man there, and they have a conversation. It's a little bit confusing, but right after that, we're in the same place. Everyone is like young and all like clean shaven and everything, and then like we go through this whole sequence of them at this party, kind of explaining like extraction and how they steal thoughts from other people by diving into their subconscious, and it's kind of all explained, and eventually we realize that this is them performing extraction on someone, and they work their way up the levels. They go up another level, and the dreamer Saito, who they think they're performing, he thinks he's awake and in the real world again, but they have another chance to do it, but he realizes it's a dream, and basically he just says that he let them in to an extent as an audition. And later Saito finds them when they're out in the real world, and he says that he wants them, Arthur and Cobb, to perform Inception for him, to plant an idea in a rival company, the heir of a rival company's head, to make him want to split up his energy empire. And they go on all this recruitment to try to get a team together. They get this really great team that is entertaining to watch them play off each other, like Eames and Arthur. They just hate each other. Yusuf is just like hilarious.
Yes.
Ariadne, like she's new to the world, so you get to have it a little bit explained, a little bit just kind of cut and paste, this is what it is. They just kind of tell that to Ariadne.
But it doesn't feel super heavy-handed because they brought in that new character, and so
Yeah,
it
we're
doesn't
kind of
feel
learning
like-
with her.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that she'd be learning it because like she needs to be introduced to the job because she's not familiar with it yet. So it's totally natural.
And then after all this preparation, they go over a lot of the mechanics of this dream sharing. Basically, you can be woken up from a dream either if you die or if there's what's called a kick. So in an upper level, if your body moves quickly, your inner ear function isn't impaired because of Yusuf's
Sedative.
compound. So basically, you can wake up like a level like you're falling if you feel like you're falling. So they go over all those mechanics, and basically they plan to perform Inception on Robert Fisher whilst they are on a plane, a Boeing 747. That's an important detail so that no one's walking in on them. And they basically get all on the plane. They go the first level into the dream. They basically like kidnap him and like interrogate him to see where they're at with the whole story. Then they basically say, all right, you're not telling us anything. We're going to drive you into the river now. And they put them in this van, like all hooded up and everything so they can't see. And then they go another level down. And when you go into a dream, you don't really remember starting in the dream, right? So he kind of forgot all that. So now he's in a hotel, and Cobb, our main protagonist, he basically says that he thinks that someone's trying to perform extraction on him. Like, so they kind of play
Break the fourth
with
wall
Fisher
almost.
at this point, basically making him think that that he's being extracted upon so that he can kind of be a part of their team, and that Cobb is like an agent of his subconscious placed there by extraction once they realized that he'd been trained for extraction. And this sounds like a ton of jargon if you've never seen the movie before. So like it's just a really heavy story with lots of mechanics to unfold, but that's the gist of what's happening.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. So they have this whole dream structure set up, and what I love about this movie is they don't dwell on the technology too much. You don't get like this whole big explanation on how these machines work or how dream sharing is even possible. But they're just like, oh, the military created it, you know.
Yeah,
so
just
here it is now.
soldiers training stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's
Nolan-
very light. Go
Sorry.
ahead. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, Nolan just tries to work in some practical application for it instead of just having it be this completely foreign thing. And when they're explaining it, they don't necessarily even need to explain how it all works as long as they maintain consistency in how the technology functions. That kind of works, and they do that well. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be realistic because it just stays consistent with the rules it establishes.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea of just keeping the dialogue pretty light and approachable is important because the story is so deep and like you go all the layers down, all the way down to the subconscious, and it definitely can get you lost really easily. So, what do you guys think of the? I'm a guy who's a big sucker for good score. What do you guys think of the score of this?
Hans Zimmer does it again. It is so
Yeah.
good. Like in the moments where it's coming down to the wire, and like every time they're leading up to a major kick, like it's sounding like dun 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 dun. Like it's just blaring in your face with these big horns, like going wow,
Wom, wom. It's like
dun,
played at a slow
dun,
speed.
like just really in your face and intense. And like the way he mixes in orchestra with synths is just really cool. Just kind of a Hans Zimmer trademark. And I think that really laid a lot of groundwork out, all of Hans Zimmer's work for future scores, like the Mandalorian score, Ludwig Göransson, the Tenet score, also Ludwig Göransson, like and all these other movies that came out after that, after Hans Zimmer's work, to incorporate a little bit more like modern synthesis into your usual orchestral score.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. This is one of my favorite soundtracks. I have a whole album of just Hans Zimmer stuff, and most of it's Inception and Interstellar stuff. It's like, some good music here. Nate, what did you think about some of the editing pacing that they used?
Well, the main thing about the editing that stuck out to me was how it was during the third act when they've got the car falling into the river. Just the way they cut between all the different layers, I think they managed to cut in a way that it was clear what was going on at each level, and the stakes were still clear. When that's a lot of footage that you have to juggle, and I think they sorted it out in ways that still made sense, and like you could still follow what was happening, you could still follow what the time limits were in each area as well. And so that's what stuck out to me the most. I don't know if this is a term or not, like that's in film or not, but I came up with the term multilinear storytelling.
Ooh,
because
I like that. Patent that.
It might be a thing already. I'll check after, but if it's not a thing, I will.
Yeah, definitely having all of those kind of. That's what I love about the layer cake of the dream setup here. Like in the span of like 8 seconds of this van falling off this tall bridge, you have like a 5 to 10 minute window on the hotel level, and then you have like a 30 or an hour long, or however long that, I don't know, it's like maybe an hour and a half long down at the hospital level, and then down on in the even deeper level, it's like ages. It's like, whoa, this and being able to kind of crush the time in like digestible segments, as you were saying there, just keeping the pacing real flowing. And I love some good slow-mo footage, and between the van scene and him falling into the bathtub, Leonardo DiCaprio falling into the bathtub, just like that was like some of the first time that I'd seen like real high quality, high frame rate, like slow-mo.
I wonder if those parts, like how much of that was shot on film and how much of that was done digital, because they can't have done like that entire van thing like on film, right? Because that must have been in the thousands of FPS at that point.
Oh yeah,
because
there's a lot of noise in that too.
Yeah,
so the shutter speed was real quick.
So they probably did have to use digital for a couple of spots there, but it's still awesome nonetheless. Like,
oh yeah, it's definitely still.
I just love the colors in film, and this is one of the talking points that I have here. Technical, how technically impressive this entire film is. Like all the practical effects, the rotating hallway with the gravity.
Yes.
Like that, they basically built that entire hallway and put it in this like lathe thing, basically, so they could
Totally.
rotate the whole hallway, and it's just amazing.
One end was opened and the camera was like just.
The camera was
out.
chained to the hallway basically, so they could keep it all going with that. And also the hotel bar, the second level of the Inception heist, that they basically put that entire like restaurant bar room on like one of those big Star Trek Disney contraptions, and they rotated the whole room so the water would all shift and everything. Like all these awesome practical effects. I've got a couple other things. The CGI. Like especially for 2010, this was just amazing CGI. Like that exploding market, the folding city, like basically all those moments when Cobb is showing Ariadne how the dream world works, and now just like some film things, like the colors are all like awesome. Like in the rainy scene, I love that moody kind of bluish kind of thing. Like it looks blue without looking too cool, if you know what I mean. Just a really awesome teal color grade, and like you see all the colors pop on the taxi and like that red car, and it's just all perfect colors. And some things that you get just from shooting on film, if you look at the windows, the overexposed blown out windows, there's a little bit of blooming kind of on the edge of the windows, and it's just a really cool like look that just gives a lot of authenticity. And I think Ryan Johnson actually talked a little bit about this when he was shooting Knives Out, and that film was shot on digital, but he actually like had his friend like develop this like program that basically adds that artificial bloom in windows and stuff, and it's just such a cool, authentic look, if you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
And one last thing, the lens flares. There's some really cool lens flares, and you can tell it's shot on an anamorphic lens
Yes,
because
I
they're
saw
these
that a couple
big,
times.
wide lens flares that take up like a whole screen. And I'm just a sucker for lens flares. They're so beautiful. That's my little spiel about the technical.
No, yeah, thank you. You noticed a couple different things that I didn't.
Same. Yeah.
But I was definitely impressed with the hallway scene. I think everyone was impressed
yeah.
by the hallway scene. I can't think of anyone who could walk away from that and just be like, oh yeah, that was
There's
average.
like fighting
No.
on the ceiling now. It's like rotating fast enough where they're just like sliding up the wall.
It's like the stray guns just like flying all over the place. Like it's like, whoa, it's way too cool.
Yep.
Also, I really like the elevator scene when he's floating and in zero G, and he's,
I wonder how they did that the zero to gravity stuff. Did they do the zero gravity plane thing, do you think, or did they use cables, or because
I'd imagine. I mean, how big was the budget? Those
it
planes
was
are
in the
not cheap.
hundreds of millions. So
Okay, well, they might have done a few zero G plane scenes, but those you only go for about 20 seconds or so in microgravity that way.
I don't think
I
there were
would
too many
imagine-
long shots. It was just brief moments with
Okay.
it anyway. So
Well, I don't know. I would guess the cable would probably be a little more simple for them
Probably.
to block and light and stuff and make sure everything's repeatable for different takes. But yeah, totally. Like I just it still blows my mind. Like I watched this movie yesterday and I was just like, wow, this is like an impressive movie. Like I'm normally sitting over here like, oh, that's details wrong, or that CGI didn't look quite good enough. But no, this every frame here. This is from 2010. So this is 11 years old. This is starting to be an older movie. It's not anything MCU bleeding edge, Mandalorian technology. But this is you're right. Practical effects really do sell. And when they're done well, I think that can really add to the movie. You guys have any thoughts on maybe some of the acting or dialogue choices that they had?
Yeah, I've got
I've got a
point
little bit on the acting. I'll let you go
Yeah, go
first,
ahead.
Nate.
Okay. I don't remember the actor's name who played Mal. I think that's like Marion Cotillard
yeah,
or something.
Marion
I think it's like a French
Cotillard,
actor,
yeah.
but
She's in the Dark Knight Rises
oh, okay.
as the what's her name Al Ghul. She's like the Al Ghul girl.
Huh.
In Dark Knight Rises. Nolan likes reusing actors. If you haven't picked up on that.
Well, the thing I noticed with her was just how like intimidating her glares were. The one that always sticks out to me is when they're trying to desperately escape, get back on the elevator after Ariadne came down and wasn't supposed to be there. And so they run into the elevator to try and escape, and then the look that she gives them as they're going up, that one just always sticks with me.
I do have something to add to that part right there.
Sure,
but
yeah, go ahead.
it's like you can really see a contrast between like what we think is like real Maul and Cobb's projection of Maul. Like almost every scene with the projection of Maul, she's like either killing someone or it's super unsettling, and like we just see this really awesome contrast. Like she like the one scene where Ariadne goes down to the elevator floor B in Cobb's memory world. Like she's like a foot taller than Ariadne, and she's just like staring her down. Like it's really unsettling, really quiet, no music usually. There's a jump scare with Maul in that elevator thing. It's just really, really intense and like slowly unsettling. Like I love those kinds of scenes where like you just like slowly get the sense that something's wrong, and it gradually builds up into this this really crazy climax where you get to see that whole thing play out.
Absolutely.
And it's so effective that like in some of those scenes, Mao will not even be on screen yet, and you're nervous. You like
Yeah.
know that look is going to be there, and she's just going to see her not she's just going to see Adriana not supposed to be there, and then she's just going to like, what is she going to do? It's really keeps you on the edge of your seat, that's for sure.
Especially when we're kind of closer to the climax town, and we get like the Cobb just looking up and seeing the drapes blowing, or seeing his kids down the ways, and I'm just like, oh,
those
no,
motifs.
what's happening?
Okay, those motifs are
Go
one
ahead.
of the talking points I have, and then
Yeah.
while we're still on the acting, I have a little pre-written little paragraph about acting,
okay.
mainly with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Someone came prepared. I like it.
I was up late last night getting this all ready, but so here's my pre-written rant about Leonardo DiCaprio. So first off, Leonardo DiCaprio is just one of the best actors around. If Tom Hanks didn't exist, he probably would be number one. If you go to the Actors Academy on YouTube, there's this video I watched yesterday evening, just with film scenes showing some of his best, or just some of the best acting in films. Young Leonardo DiCaprio was in 2 out of the 6 or so in this video, and he was doing all these difficult things. He was playing a character that was on drugs and was going through withdrawals and stuff, and like he was in pain. There was like crying, just a complete mess. Like I can't imagine how hard that'd be to like act through. And it was like just a really ugly thing to watch, and that was kind of the goal there. It didn't feel fake at all, and it made it even more emotional and uncomfortable. And on the other one, he was playing a mentally disabled person, figuring out that his mother had died in her sleep, but he just thought like she wasn't waking up at first. And all these like deep, really emotional things, and like you just see his shift throughout that scene from like the excitement of waking his mother up to realizing what had happened. Like it takes so much talent to do these things, and he was like 18 in most of these roles. Like my favorite one though is Romeo plus Juliet. It's like a Romeo and Juliet spin-off where it's like in 90s LA, and like they're all gangs instead of rival noble families, and like, but it has all the original Shakespeare dialogue and stuff. So he had to perform all that Shakespearean English dialogue, and like all this difficult like screaming and crying. I keep talking about screaming and crying, but like it's a really difficult thing to convincingly pull off, I feel like. And he just has so much range as an actor. And we get to see a lot of that emotional acting in Inception, I feel like. Like he's able to switch very quickly from the professional kind of like spy like character almost, and then like he's like screaming his head off at someone, like when after Saito gets shot, like he just like is like, this was your responsibility, you were supposed to do the research, and like it just you feel it. It's just some crazy acting there. And it's just a wild ride with DiCaprio as just such a crazy actor. But
I love a lot of the close-ups that Nolan uses on DiCaprio. I was going to say Leonardo's face, but call him DiCaprio because that's more fun. It's like, especially at the that end scene there where we have Saito and Cobb sitting at the table, an old man filled with regret, waiting to die alone, and it's just like real tight on Leonardo's face, and it's just like you can see all of the emotions in his forehead and his eyebrows, and like everything. Like bad actors and good actors, the thing that separates them is the eye movements, the fine muscle control,
all
of
the
just,
subtleties.
Like, exactly,
Yeah.
and he nails all of that. And
everything that happens in between the lines, everything that happens in the silence, that is what takes a good actor to a great actor. Like, incredible.
Yeah, the scene that sticks out to me with his acting is when he's on the phone with his kids, and you can tell that he just wants to make them happy. He just wants to try and reassure them that he'll be home. And when he finds out that they're like not super fond of him, and they're kind of separated from him, and then he gets cut off, and he's just desperately screaming into the phone, trying to keep their attention, and he can't do it. Like, there's a lot there, and that's like probably the most notable part for me of his acting.
Definitely. You guys notice any fun dialogue or anything while you were watching this?
All the motifs in there. I loved all the motifs. Like you're waiting for a train, a train that'll take you far away. You know where you hope this train will take you, but you can't know for sure. Yet it doesn't matter. Now tell me why it doesn't matter. Like that just crops up in so many places, and you kind of realize the meaning of it as like it kind of ties into the story with the train in limbo, and like it's this really great metaphor, but it's also taken literally in a couple places too, and it's just all these awesome motifs. Do you want to take a leap of faith or become an old man filled with regret, waiting to die alone? Like going full circle with that, it makes it an ever more powerful moment. And that's why I love a lot of the dialogue in this movie, because it's a little bit poetic in the sense that like all these motifs are carried through. And this kind of contributes a little bit to a lot of the crazy theorists out there thinking that the entire movie is a dream and that someone's performing Inception on Cobb in the process somehow, and that's why all these lines are repeated and stuff. But whether it's a dream or not, it's just like all these great lines that tie everything together.
Absolutely.
Really great.
One of my favorite lines is from Cobb's father or father-in-law, the professor. He's like, "Are you here to corrupt one of my brightest minds again?"
Again.
Ooh, ouch.
Yeah, that line kind of gives some history without explicitly stating it. It just implies some stuff, so...
It's not, strictly speaking, legal.
Legal. Yeah, that should have been her cue to walk away from the mess, but...
But then Ariadne kind of like progresses into one of the more like important characters in the story, because
Definitely.
Cobb has opened up to her about a lot of the things that the team has to go through, and she's kind of like the one who actually has like known what Cobb is thinking and known a lot of what he's going through. So she's kind of an advocate there for the rest of the team about what's happening with Maul kind of invading everything. Like, other than Arthur having a faint idea of what's going on, Ariadne becomes very important very quickly with her time in this crazy dream-sharing universe.
Should also say her acting is very good as well. I don't think there's a bad actor in this movie, or actress, or actor, but definitely very good, very, very strong. What were you gonna say, Nate? Sorry.
Oh, I wasn't gonna say anything.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
It looks like you're going to say something. What was the most confusing part of this movie for you guys? There's a couple points that were confusing, even on my most recent watch through.
I think just kind of talking about confusion, like I'm happy that this movie is confusing, because there's a moment where it's a tipping point sort of where everything just kind of makes sense. Like that's the reason this first viewing of this movie for me was like one of the most magical experiences I'd ever had watching a film, where like all of this crazy stuff is all culminating together to this moment of realization, like where everything like sort of falls into place. It's somewhere in the third act where everything just kind of just comes together really beautifully, and I can't nail the exact spot, but I think it's probably different for everyone, but it just sort of clicks. And with all these confusing like mechanics of, especially there at the end when they're all like diving into limbo to get people and all this stuff, it sort of clicks when you realize that like Saito and Cobb, like that relationship they had, and it's beautiful. It's indescribable with words, I think. You have to watch it, you have to see it, you have to feel it to believe it. It's just a wild experience.
I'd say the most confusing part for me, definitely came in the third act. There was one moment where the van like tumbles down a hill and it does a couple rotations. I kind of expected that to be an accidental kick that would wake them up early, but it wasn't. And I don't know, kicks confused me a little bit because like hitting the like I thought the falling motion was enough to wake them up, but then they need to dunk him. But later on, they're able to just have Arthur fall off a chair and he wakes up immediately. It's just a little confusing there, and I think just the mechanics of the kick specifically were the most confusing part.
Yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies, like the barrel roll, for instance, but like some other inconsistencies, like Cobb isn't supposed to know anything about the layouts, but there's two spots in particular where they're in a dream all discussing everything, like in the hotel and in the New York City kind of street where Cobb is there discussing, like, no wonder the train came crashing through the alley there. And some other inconsistencies, Fisher is a part of the team to help break in on the third level, but they're openly talking about like Browning like actually not being a part of that in front of him, because Fisher thinks they're breaking into Browning's mind, but it's just a lot of inconsistencies there where they're openly talking about how they have to perform Inception on Fisher while Fisher's standing right there. But just a couple inconsistencies like that. But
and there was another one with Cobb where he has to he can't know about the layout of the dream at all, but then he makes Ariadne tell him about that secret like air duct or whatever, that secret passage, and he doesn't even need to know it. Like he just asks her to tell him what the secret is, and then tells her to go tell someone else. It's like that's the reason that Mal was able to get in there, and so there are definitely like some inconsistencies with these rules, and just like some like out of character, like I would expect them to be a little smarter than that, but they're not too prominent or too big that it like ruins the movie or anything.
And honestly, what I love about this movie is almost just the inconsistencies, right? Because when you first watch this movie, everything feels like an inconsistency. You're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. What's going on here? You know, how are they in limbo? How did they get out of limbo? What's going on here? You know, they already built all this. Why is this all here already? You know, what's going on? But then as you sit down, pay attention, do a little bit of research after, I definitely did, and kind of figure out what's going on here, it makes a ton of sense. But then there are still those, small inconsistencies, which they almost feel like breadcrumbs to something that we haven't yet figured out as an internet fan base of this movie, right? It feels like Nolan was just like sprinkling in some like little breadcrumbs of like some other things that we just haven't picked up on. And I don't think that's the case because it's been 11 years at this point and everyone's been thinking about this, but it just feels that way. Like it feels like there's a little bit more to be discovered if you just watch it again. And that's the trap that I've caught myself in a couple times recently.
So one thing on that note, there's a large group of advocates that the entire thing is a dream. And I think we ought to go over that just a little bit. Okay. But like there's a couple little Easter eggs, like, and obviously everyone discussed the top falling at the end, but his kids, why are they always wearing the same clothes and doing that same turnaround thing? And it's like Cobb's like expecting them to do that, and why are they in that exact same position when he gets home at the end, right? Another thing, in the airport, if you pause it on the right frame, there's someone holding up a sign that says LAM, which is mall backwards. And just like just little stuff like that. I'm like, did no one just put that there like out of coincidence, or was that an active like Easter egg that this is all a dream, or just something to get people thinking? Like all these tiny little things that make everyone unsure whether the end is a dream or the entire thing is a dream. Or like the main theory is that Inception is being performed on Cobb throughout the whole movie to help him come to terms with the fact that Mal had died, or he's performing Inception on himself somehow, which is a little bit more far-fetched. But
oh my gosh,
all these crazy theories and these huge Reddit threads of just like people endlessly discussing this, and I think it's interesting, but at some point it can just go too far.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that that ending is real, mainly because I don't know if you guys noticed, but Cobb wears his wedding ring in all of the dreams, but in all of the scenes that take place in the like quote unquote real world, he's not wearing his wedding ring, and in that
Hmm.
final scene, he's not wearing it either. Um, so I'm
Interesting.
led to believe that it's that final scene is real, but I'm not even sure if that's like the most important part of it. If you know what I mean, like because
Yeah.
Cobb's he spins the top, but he doesn't really care to find out what it. He just goes to embrace his kids right away.
Hmm.
So he kind of just accepts his reality because he gets to be with his kids. So it's not necessarily even all that important or the most important thing whether or not the top falls.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Like it it isn't about it being a dream or not being a dream. It's about you accepting your current reality, or not. With the characters, a lot of it was them choosing to shoot Maul. After he shoots Fisher. It's like, are you going to accept this reality or are you not? And that's kind of what the whole movie's about. And you're right, it is really really fun there at the end when he decides to accept it. Whether or not it's real or not, we'll never know. And even Nolan himself has said it's up to your interpretation, which I'm just like, ah!
That
People have
reminds me.
done.
There's this one Maul quote. When they go into limbo, when Ariadne and Cobb go into
Hmm.
limbo to find Fisher and Saito, she says, "You don't have to choose to be in one reality anymore, so choose this reality." Like he's so deeply invested into this world that like really reality is subjective at this point. It's
Yeah,
whatever you want it to be, and it's just a lot of interesting, deep, heavy concepts to deal with there.
yeah,
And one other
100%.
meta thing that I found in researching the end. So Michael Caine is the actor of Professor Miles, and in an interview he said that Nolan told him that every scene he was in was real, and he's in that final
That's kind of a
scene.
giveaway.
So, I mean,
Okay.
that's like a meta thing that's not necessarily supported by the film at all, but it's
That's
Yeah.
another Ryan Johnson kind of
Yeah,
letting
yeah.
slip Apple's secret about
It
the whole
reminded me of that,
antagonist
yeah.
thing.
I don't think we should even say
Yeah.
that. Not let's not ruin it for
Yeah,
the
we
audience
better stop
here.
spreading the word, but now everyone's going to want to look it up.
Yeah. As far as inconsistencies, maybe it's not an inconsistency per se, but I was kind of always confused, I guess, on why that train ends up there. Like, I get it. I get it's Maul. His
Well,
subconscious is
it's just instead of
portraying that
Maul being in the subconscious, the train was in the subconscious. So the train
Okay,
is a
but
projection.
they're not in Leonardo DiCaprio's dream though. They're not in Cobb's dream.
Well,
They're
the
in
way
the dreamer's dream.
Cobb explained it is that other people that are in the dream can bring in their own projections. So he
Okay.
said, like when he's telling Ariadne why he shouldn't know the layouts, like no one should see the layouts because we might bring in our own projections.
Okay.
Like the way that he brought Maul into that very first or second scene of the movie, like everyone can bring in projections really. So the train was basically just a projection for him.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you imagine having so much power, geopolitically or money wise, to make one phone call and fix a guy's
Yeah.
murder charge?
That was an issue for me.
Like
That
Saito
In, like,
is like
10 minutes.
some like Japanese billionaire that probably like realistically wouldn't have very much pull over the American legal system, but maybe he knows
Well,
a guy
I
that
mean-
knows a guy or something. Like
It is all about knowing the guy that knows the guy, but like that's kind of a big move there, movie. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's quite a stretch. That's for sure.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines in the entire movie. I bought the
I
airline.
bought the airline. He just does the
It's
thing
just
with
like-
his.
It's like, I don't know. What were you thinking we'd do? I
It
just
seemed
bought the
neato.
airline. Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. What did you guys think of some of the action scenes?
Action. I wrote out some action stuff. So
Okay.
it's like just all the choreography and the action scenes. You can tell that this had been thought out for a long time. The hallway fight scene, the rotating hallway, is probably the best example of it. But
Yeah.
the Mombasa chase, I feel like people forget to talk about Mombasa sometimes when they're recruiting Eames. But the score there, it's actually a really interesting musical. I think it's called a hemiola, where the song is in four. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But it's subdivided into quarters of
Okay.
those fourths. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, like 1 iana,
Yeah,
2
yeah.
iana, 3 iana, 4 iana. But instead of going on those ones, twos, and threes and fours, it alternates. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, the da 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 da
Huh.
da.
Huh.
So that's something that that I pick up on in the score there, and like it adds a lot of intensity. It either feels like you're adding two notes or you're skipping a note in that, and just a lot of like kind of off kilter feeling is how jazz people would describe it, I think. But
Interesting.
that Mombasa scene where he's like trying to fit himself through the crack and like
Okay, we got to pause on the crack here. That guy was like making himself as wide as possible.
yeah, he was like
had,
trying to go
an
through a
arm that-
diagonal like
I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
there's this hike out here in southern Utah where like it's called the Lemon Squeeze or the Crack or whatever you call it. It's this really narrow slot canyon. You can have to climb up this little slot canyon, and the shortest it gets is about like a foot wide. So you really have to squeeze through there sideways. But you don't try to go through this way. You rotate
Yeah.
sideways so you can get through it. He's like trying to shove himself through that lemon squeeze there, and you had to add intensity somehow. But if you wanted to make it intense, why not just have him go through it sideways, and the people are closer behind him or something? But
There you go. Yeah. Well, yeah.
but the whole thing where like Saito happens to conveniently be in Mombasa, just like pulls up in the car, like knocks the bodyguard over with the car door, just like he's like "Kefra, lift me to cop." Like he's just like there's like he's like, "What are you doing in Mombasa?" Just all these like it's just a really interesting scene, and the whole chase scene through the alleys, and
Yeah.
it was good.
One of my favorite action scenes is definitely the snow-covered third level, where you got the guy on the Humvee with the snow treads. I'm like, oh, that looks like a fun vehicle right there. You're just going up the hill, and you got these guys hanging on with a little rope, and they're just getting slaughtered, and you know, it's kind of sad what happens.
Just kind of
to those
over the
people.
top, and just like, why would
Yeah.
you build this random base with a hospital in it in the middle of the snowy area, like with this crazy snow outfitted military? Like it's just like it feels real while you're in it, right? Like when they're talking about the dreams, but it's
Yeah,
just a lot of
Definitely.
epic stuff.
Anything for you, Nate, on the action?
Well, my action scene was just going to be that hallway fight. As cliche as that answer is, it's like
No.
Sliding up a
not
wall is
cliche.
not
Come on,
cliche.
man.
Come
no.
on, I
The
mean,
answer, I said the answer is cliche, not the scene.
okay.
But it adds tension because it's the mechanics of the fight, like how each fighter is going to react. Like it's kind of unpredictable, so you're not necessarily sure what's going to happen. So I like that part of it, and obviously just how unique the spectacle is. But also the fact that it makes sense for it to be that way, as he's simultaneously on another level being rotated. Following the rules, I like that. So.
one thing that I want to talk about is like the kind of subtle comedy they always bring in
Yeah,
throughout
I
this,
know.
like when they're in the hotel level and all the projections are looking for the dreamer, and the dreamer's Arthur. Arthur's like, "Quick, give me a kiss!" Like he's just like, he's like, she's like, "It didn't work." He's like, "Oh, it was worth a shot." Or Arthur and Eames just like hate each other the whole time. There's like this little rivalry happening. Like Arthur keeps falling out of chairs, which is just hilarious. Like he's just like flailing about right before he falls, and the thing where Yusuf like had a lot of champagne on the plane before they went into the dream, so it's raining in the dream because he has to pee.
Funny.
And then my favorite one.
I didn't catch that until my viewing yesterday.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's
I get
clever.
it. Uh-huh. My favorite one is with Yusuf when he's driving, and after he does the barrel roll and he lands it, he's like, "Did you see that?" And he's like looking back at all the people asleep in the van. He's just like just kind of he just kind of gets a little sad there. But all these little funny moments kind of sprinkled into the deep action and intellectual bits of the movie. So.
And the great thing about the
It kept
comedy
it
is
lighthearted.
that it fits the tone. Like, it isn't jarring. Like, it's not like there will be a super serious and sad scene followed by just a stupid joke. It's all.
It's the kind of comedy where it's like you know, there's British comedy and American comedy. British comedy is like really ironic, sarcastic, and kind of dark. This was British comedy, and that's I really appreciate it. Like, just the way that it's like really sarcastic, like, and everyone just hates each other. Like, there's something funny about that. Like,
Yeah, the scene I always like is when I believe Arthur's just shooting a gun. This is on the 3rd level at the snow base, and then Eames comes in with like a rocket launcher and is like,
that
"I'm
was in
gonna
the
give this
first
a
level
try."
actually, but yeah.
Oh,
Like, he's just like,
I'm getting
mustn't be
messed up.
afraid to dream a little bigger, darling, and just pulls
Oh,
up
yeah.
this giant grenade gun.
Grenade launcher. It's like, whoa. Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Like
I especially like the kind of sad comedy almost. Like, it's not comedy in the classical sense that it makes the audience laugh. It's more comedy as in, this is an interesting situation that these characters have gotten themselves into. The scene where Fisher's dad is in the deathbed, and Fisher's there, and Maurice is the lawyer guy, right? He's like, we need to start thinking about power of attorney. And I'm just like, you guys have gotten this far and not talked about power of attorney? Like, that's the first thing that you do when, you know, someone starts going downhill physically. You know, get the power of attorney to someone. It's just like, oh no, wow, that's not good there, guys. Multi-billionaire hasn't had a power of attorney yet. Okay, but anyway, yeah, lots of fun little moments, definitely with the acting there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think of some of the emotion that some of these scenes were able to pull off?
Well, let me scroll through my 5-page notes.
Oh, the emotion that I
5
pointed
pages?
out in the phone call scene to his kids. That one always gets me. And obviously, when Mal takes that jump, Cobb's acting there, like, really effective, like, just such a pained scream, and it's like pretty authentic too.
Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio, we're coming back to it. It's he's a good actor.
And those two topics are extremely tied together, between the acting and the emotion, but also the emotion that it's able to make you feel as the viewer. You know, I obviously haven't experienced my wife jumping off a building, blaming me for not believing her reality. So I can't.
That's a little bit of a unique situation you got yourself.
Exactly,
there,
right. That's what movies are all about, to allow you to be able to step in the footsteps of these movies and watch these characters and kind of get emotionally attached to them. And just sitting there watching this, like, wow, you know, ooh, like that would be rough. And obviously, Leonardo DiCaprio is able to,
He really sells it.
Bring that to you in like a real presentable manner. But even if he wasn't acting as well, or if it was some other actor that wasn't performing that, I think I still would have felt that, just because of the writing and the blocking and just the story that led up to that moment. Is just like, ooh, wow.
So what I really like about the So what I really like about the emotion in this film is it drives the entire plot for Cobb. His sole goal in this film, like, sure, he has other things that he has to do to reach this one goal, but his main goal is to get back home to his kids. And the fact that this whole thing is driven by emotion and that desire to see his family again, it makes everything like so much more important. Like, he could get arrested when he lands in the States there, right, like off the plane, or like all these other things could go wrong, and that just it makes it a lot more important for him. And also just like the whole arc with Fisher, I already talked about this earlier, but like Fisher's whole catharsis thing when they're planning, they're like saying positive emotion always trumps negative emotion, and like all these things that are really quotable, you know. And just like the whole story with Fisher really coming to terms with his father, and like you get to see a lot of that like kind of rich people don't always have it as good as you think they do thing, but like it's just a lot of powerful emotional beats where even if we're not in that situation, almost no one's in that situation, we're able to put ourselves in the shoes of those actors or those characters through the actors and see that.
Yeah.
And it really does a lot for the stakes, because it's not just physical stakes of will this character die or not. It's will this character get to fulfill his desire to see his children, which he hasn't seen in such a long time. Will he finally be free of that emotional pain that he gets from constantly being reminded of Mal? Like that's almost more engaging than physical action, and seeing if he'll like be able to survive this scene. Like it's more impactful when you get the emotional payoff rather than like just an action-based payoff.
Yeah.
One thing to add to that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'll think of it again. But
No, it's all right. One thing kind of going on the kids being the emotional, because like this whole movie is kind of structured around like Cobb being separated from his kids is the emotional driver of the entire movie, and I just kind of gotta wonder, why didn't he bring his kids to Argentina or wherever he's living?
well,
I feel
he
this would
goes
be
to
way
France a
easier
lot.
here
Why
getting-
didn't Grandpa bring the kids to France? Because he's always back and forth.
Right?
He teaches at a university in France. Like what?
that was just like, I mean, that should have gone in inconsistencies, but like I don't know, dude. I feel like if I really wanted to see my kids and I wasn't allowed to visit their country, I might bring them to my country instead of go to theirs, you know? I don't know. It seems more logical.
I remembered my thing. At the end, this ties back into the emotion, it ties back into Cobb's motivation, and it ties back into whether it's all a dream or not. At the end, he accepts this as his reality no matter what. He doesn't care if it's real or not because he just gets to be there with his family again. And it's a really powerful moment, like that final scene before it pans over to the spinning top. Like you just see him drop everything. He the first thing he does when he walks in the doors, he spins the top to see if it's real. But then he doesn't care about the top anymore. And it's both literal and metaphorical. He's leaving the top behind, and he just wants to embrace this reality, whatever it is to him.
How does this movie compare up against other Nolan films that you've seen? Because I know the three of us are all big Nolan fans.
I've seen every Nolan film except for Dunkirk, Memento, and his other two early ones. So, this is... I'm going to go into a little Nolan spiel now, I guess. But
Uh-oh.
I like them all for different reasons. What?
Buckle your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll keep it brief, but I like them all for different reasons. Inception is the balance of all these different reasons. Nolan films bring a couple different cards to the table when it comes to what makes them great. There's all of the mind-bending intellectual stuff that happens. There's the character growth that we get to see a lot of, and there's all the technically impressive practical effects and color grading and video quality that we see. So Inception, it nails all three of these better than all of the other ones. But if I talk about like Tenet for a second, Tenet, it's technically impressive. There's lots of great visual effects. It looks amazing, and it has a very complex plot, but it lacks a little bit of character growth. Dark Knight trilogy, it's all about character growth, and it's of course very technically impressive, but it kind of lacks in the mind-bending department. Interstellar, we have that character growth, we have that technical impressivity, if that's a word. Like the fact that there's all this reflective stuff, you don't see a single camera, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All this crazy CGI of melting into wormholes, that's just crazy. So you have all three of them, but I just think Inception pulls it off a little bit better. It's a little bit easier to relate to Inception than it is to Interstellar. I feel like both of them are hard to relate to, but Interstellar is like you're an astronaut going on a mission, but you age faster than people or you age slower than people. That's a very difficult thing to relate to. So I just from all these Nolan films, I think that Inception, it might not be the best in the mind-bending department like Tenet. It might not be the best in the emotional department like Interstellar, and it might not be the best in the technical department also like Tenet, but it balances everything in the most artful way, and it just pulls it off so well. There's little things that kind of make or break some of these movies. Like Tenet, it was really jargony the whole time. That's my complaint with it. And it just is it's the fact that Inception really seamlessly balances all these things that it's what makes it one of the greatest movies of all time for me. That's my spiel.
That was a good spiel.
Yeah. Oh, of the Nolan films I've seen, I think this would. I think Dark Knight is still going to be my favorite, just because I think it. I think the story makes more sense than Inception, and not just because Inception is complicated. I think there are like some of the inconsistency we've talked about. There are some other issues as well that, from what I've seen, I remember Dark Knight holding up pretty well, writing wise, but I haven't seen it in a little bit, so maybe that's off. But yeah, and then Tenet is lower than this, definitely because of the character. Like, it's technically impressive, but I didn't care about like almost any of it because there's no like character for me to attach myself to. So yeah, that's what I meant with
I mean,
that.
when the character doesn't have a name, that's kind of a big giveaway, but
That is, yeah.
it's hard to
That's the
connect
thing
with
as well.
someone that you don't know their name, but it's whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess. Oh, go ahead.
Just on Dark Knight for a second. Characters, we get to learn so much about Joker and a lot about like his past and his present. Like, he's just such an entertaining and unsettling character.
Yeah.
I love any acting that makes anything unsettling. Back to Maul, like that just is really something that I feel like is very tricky to pull off. And it's probably a lot deeper than just the actors too. Like, you have to go into sound design a lot with that too, or rather lack of it, and knowing when to not have any sound and stuff. But just a lot of different departments coming together. That's why I love film so much. Like, because you get to see a lot of technical, like, wonder things that make you wonder a lot. Like, wow, how'd they pull this crazy explosion thing off? Like, stuff like that. And it also brings together like conversation and everyday things that we get to experience. And yeah, back to you, Nick.
Absolutely. Back to me, Nick. So as far as all of the Nolan movies that I've seen, and I haven't seen all of them. I haven't seen Tenet yet. I know we'll probably get to that at some point in my life. But I am a huge sucker for Interstellar. Like, Interstellar is, I have a going list of my favorite movies ranked, and WALL-E's at the top, followed by Toy Story 3 or 4. I can never decide which one of the two is my favorite. And then right after that is Interstellar, and then Inception. And for me, at least, Interstellar, like, I'm a huge space fan. If nobody could tell, then hi, I'm Nick. Big space fan here. So like, Interstellar is like my favorite kind of sci-fi movie, because it's like combining all of the things that I love about space with all of the things that I love about Nolan movies in general, just bending your brain. But I think if I'm going to sit down and say, hey, I want to budget the next hour, 2.5 hours to like a good movie that I'm going to like sit down and be engaged with, I'm probably going to typically pick Inception, just because I feel like Inception is a much more engaging plot than Interstellar is. Interstellar does have its moment at the end there when he's in the fifth dimensional whatever thingy, but at least throughout the entire movie, I am just always so absorbed in Inception, just being able to, like, whoa, they're inside of a dream, inside of a dream. There's so many moving parts you got to keep track of. It's a little challenging if you don't give it your whole attention. And some of my family members who have been like, oh, we got to watch Inception, we got to watch Interstellar, they'll just be like, well, I don't get this movie at the end. And I'm like, well, that's because you're scrolling through your phone the entire time. You actually have to pay attention to these movies. They're not passive experiences. These are like active. You gotta pay attention. You gotta be engaged with the story. And I think that Inception is probably the most engaging Nolan film, just from a storyline perspective.
Mm-hmm. I was only able to watch that movie in the background after I'd seen it probably about 4 or 5 times. Like, because this last time I watched it, it was almost strictly for note-taking purposes. So I was able to focus a lot on my notes and stuff without having to really fully engage myself with what was happening. But it's just such an attention-grabbing movie, and I know like when to put on Inception depending on who's around, because I know there's the kind of people that won't care, and then there's the kind of people that will care about it. So it's one of those rare gems that you have to use carefully. If that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely a good movie there. Any other thoughts that you want to bring up?
I've got one. So,
okay, go ahead.
Nathan had mentioned tension a few minutes back, and I think one really unique mechanic that they use. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the ticking clock, ticking time bomb. It's kind of a film trope that people use, and all the people within someone's dream being able to having people in the dream notice the protagonists, just giving them eerie glances as they walk by, or everyone in the hotel just turning their heads and staring at them as the music just slowly builds up. It just creeps in.
So unsettling. I love those unsettling moments.
Yeah, and it's really, and it's super subtle, and like a natural way to add almost like a ticking clock element to it, where you have to figure this out before these people fully realize, and you can kind of visually sense that without throwing out like an arbitrary 16 hours before attacks on all free worlds begin or something like that.
Yeah.
To add to that, in the hotel, one of the better moments is in the second level of the hotel when Cobb is talking to Fisher, and Fisher starts realizing everyone in the room just starts like staring at them. It's not necessarily a negative stare, it's more just like a attentive stare. But like everyone in their room shifts their heads the same exact time. And I'm like, whoa. Like, just an awesome moment.
100%. And yeah, I love those menacing glares just like as they're walking down the street, and I guess it was Cobb's subconscious with Ariadne. Just the subtle stares of, people like bumping up against her or whatever. Just kind of like,
I'm telling your subconscious to back it off, or like something like that.
Definitely. Lots of fun. Yep. Well, I think that was the review for Inception.
Should we go around and give it our out of 10 scores?
Of course, yes. This is not a Taylosive related entity, so we don't need to do out of 8. We should do out of 10, like normal humans. Nate, what would you rate this out of 10?
Okay, well, typically when I rank films, I typically do it in terms of like letter grades. I find that a little easier because I think this actually came up on the Tech podcast. You and Drew thought like a 5 out of 10 meant like an F or something. So I think it's just a little clearer to do letter grades. And I think I would give this like a objectively thinking, like kind of just taking my personal like bias out of it. I think I'd give it like a B, maybe like B minus around there. But like subjectively, I'm giving this like an A minus in terms of just personal enjoyment. Yeah, I kind of separate the two. Just
Okay.
yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Very balanced of you. Nathan, what do you think?
Well, if I'm gonna do the same subjective objective thing, I think objectively, this movie just it brings so much to the table, and it has so many different opportunities for growth, like that we don't see in the movie. What I like about a movie is you want everything in the film to come away different than what you found it, and you want yourself to come away different from before and after you started. And Inception probably does the best at that out of any film I've ever seen. So objectively, if I'm not gonna bring my bias into it, I think it's at least an A minus. For myself, it gets that. It depends if we're using A pluses or not here, but this is an A plus film for me because of everything I've been talking about for the last hour or so.
I think I'll have to agree with Nate on the B minus rating objectively. Just because this movie is not for everyone, right? Like I feel like when I say this movie is an A, objectively, it means like it's approachable by just about anyone. Anyone can enjoy just about anything. But this movie is extremely specific. I'm kind of surprised I was able to find two other people who liked this movie as much as I did to even talk about it, because it's I'm joking obviously because there are tons of fans of this, but it's very niche. It isn't your Pixar movie that can be picked up by literally anyone age 9 months to 99 years. It's not this universal movie. It's extremely specific. And I think that just because of that, I can't give it that objective A, because I know that a lot of people will walk in, like some of my family members, and just be, scrolling through their phone half the time and look up and be extremely confused why they've seen the same shot of this white van falling off a bridge for the past hour. And they're just like, what is going on here? But personally, I'd have to give this an A minus. 100% A minus. I think there are 2 or 3 movies that are slightly better than this one. But for very different reasons. This one is the quintessential mix up your brain movie in my mind. So,
well, if you really want to get your mind boggled, then Tenet is the movie for you.
Oh,
but
yeah. Oh, man.
we're gonna have to do that at some point, because I have not seen this yet, and I've heard enough good things about it to say that I do need to spend the time there.
if they're still showing it in theaters near you, I'd highly recommend seeing it in the theater.
Okay.
It is a theater experience. That movie was made for theaters. That's why it was like the first movie to release post-pandemic exclusively in theaters. So
Interesting. All right. Well, I'll have to take a look at that. Well, before we wrap up here, I feel like we should kind of share a little bit more of the future of this this podcast channel. Whatever this is going to end up being, we don't know. We just figured we all like this one movie, so we might as well talk about it. I don't see us always talking about movie reviews, so if these are your antithesis, you hate movie reviews, then guess what? Not all of these are going to be movie reviews, but if you love movie reviews, I'm sure we'll do more than one in our future. So we're all very passionate about what we do. Mr. Nate over there is an amazing video editor. He has some mad skills with pool, and I'm very, very shocked with that. And Nathan over there is an amazing audio engineer and musician, and we all have a bunch of passion about a bunch of different things. So I'm sure there's going to be more content about I don't know what at this point, but we'll figure out something. So anyway, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Nothing I haven't said.
it's
Okay.
it's been a pleasure talking with you guys about this great film.
Likewise. And thank you, Christopher Nolan, for
Yes.
putting this together.
I wonder
We
what he's going to
literally
do
wouldn't be here
next.
without you.
There's usually a little bit more
Oh.
word at this point about what's going to happen, because Tenet kind of it had a weird release, so he was put in a tricky spot with people wanting to pay for his movies. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit interesting, wondering where that's going to go. But
Well, he might take
I
a
think we
decade
should-
to write his next movie, because I don't know if you heard,
Yeah.
but I think it took him like 5 or 6 years to write Tenet.
yeah, well,
Something like that?
he does a couple at a time, right? Because he's released movies 2 to 3 years apart in the past before. He doesn't like just. I'm gonna spend the next 15 years working on this movie. Like,
It's gonna be good though. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a whole topic. We'll have to do some research and come back with some speculation on what Nolan might be up to next. Anyway, I've been Nick. Those are the Nathans. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one. Bye.
see ya.